Today, I would like to welcome our new guest, Nicholas Kemp, the Ikigai coach. Nicholas is the founder and head coach of Ikigai Tribe, a community dedicated to sharing the authentic Japanese concept of Ikigai. His journey began with a transformative trip to Tokyo at the age of 5 and later a restaurant management traineeship in Japan, which led him to live there for a decade. His passion for Ikigai is captured in his book Ikigai Kan, Feel a Life Worth Living, where he debunks Western misconceptions and provides genuine insights from Japanese culture. Nicholas Kemp, welcome to Talking Wealth. How are you today?
Dale, thank you for having me. I'm very grateful to be here, so I'm very excited.
Well, you look good on the set, so hey, you know, two good-looking roosters having a chat about Ikigai. Can you just explain Ikigai? Because I had never heard of it before you approached us.
Sure, so I should probably start with what it's not. So if you Google Ikigai online, you will come across a Venn diagram asking you, are you doing something that you love, that you're good at, that the world needs, and that you can be paid for? And there's this sweet spot in the middle where if you can achieve all those 4 things, you've sort of achieved Ikigai. Now that's a Western appropriation. There's also these romantic links to Okinawa, and people think the word's from Okinawa, they think it's the secret to longevity, they think it's your one life purpose, and they think it means you never retire. So as it often happens, in the West we take foreign concepts and either simplify them or romanticize them. So I always love to go to the work of Mieko Kamiya, who I like to call her the mother of Ikigai. And she defined Ikigai as you have Ikigai objects. So this would be people, relationships, roles, hobbies, small joys like your morning coffee, or it could be the pursuit of life-defining goals. And then you have Ikigai Kan, which is the feeling of Ikigai. So that could be passion or this internal calmness or excitement or contentment. So Ikigai objects, and then you have the related feeling, which is Ikigai Kan.
I was actually, when I was doing a little bit of research before you came in today, now I'm way from being anywhere near an expert on Ikigai. That's why we have you in here. But to me, it sounds like it's a way of living, or can I say, it's like finding your passion. Does that make sense? Am I on the right path?
So it can include passion. It's very subjective and it changes over time. So for guys like us who are still very much passionate about our work, I imagine doing these interviews and learning is part of your Ikigai. And perhaps when we're older, maybe when we have grandkids, that'd be sources of Ikigai. So it's very subjective, but it really is the answer to what makes life worth living. So if you think, what makes my life worth living? The answer is Ikigai. And so then you can just think about, it's my friendships with my old school friends, or it's learning music, or it's Japanese food, or it's, what we talked about before, having a beer. In fact, when I asked my best Japanese friend to sort of explain Ikigai to me, he stopped and thought and he said, imagine it's a Friday night in Shinjuku, 2 salarymen go into a bar, it's been a brutal week, they're exhausted, they quickly order 2 beers, they don't want to go home because they're feeling guilty about not being there, not being a good fathers, and their wives don't really want to see them. And then their beers arrive and they take their glasses, they say, "Otsukare-sama," sort of recognizing each other's contribution for the week, and they take that first sip, and one goes, "Sa, kore wa ore no ikigai da," meaning, this is my Ikigai. So that life-affirming sip of beer could be someone's Ikigai. So it can include coping mechanisms. So even smoking or alcohol could be someone's Ikigai, and that sort of points to the subjective nature of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I know in Western culture, we try and put things in little boxes and create order to something, but it doesn't sound like this is anything like that.
No. I like to refer to it as Japan's version of positive psychology, and it's their measure of well-being. There's actually a psychometric tool called the Ikigai 9 that they now use to measure one's level of Ikigai. So it's quite unique because it's a word Japanese grow up with, and they don't really discuss or think about that much. Yet behind it all, there's this growing body of research that now both Japanese and non-Japanese are building on.
Yeah. I mean, I'm probably falling into these Western habits of going, okay, now where does that actually fit? But I mean, I know when we talk about happiness, and we do have these surveys that saying, you know, what's the most livable city or which is the happiest city in the world, and they have criteria, but it sounds as like this is a form of happiness, but it's how do you quantify it? Or is there, like, you know, sometimes you'll go, oh, well, we need to meditate and we do this and we do that and we do that. That's how you achieve X. But this doesn't sound like that, does it?
No, and I would caution that Ikigai is not, the goal of Ikigai is not happiness. Ikigai is actually more about life satisfaction. And so if we relate happiness to an emotion that, you know, comes and goes, it comes and goes. So we can't always be happy, and we shouldn't expect to always be happy. But we can probably draw some sense of life satisfaction in our daily life. And if I go back and reference Mieko Kamiya, long story that we won't get into, but through her work with actually Japanese lepers who were shipped off mainland Japan, ostracized, she had this affinity with them. And she decided to use them as a study group for her research on Ikigai. And she discovered through interviewing them and doing all these questionnaires and tests on, you know, what makes life worth living, 7 Ikigai needs. And they were life satisfaction, change and growth, a bright future, resonance, so your relationship with your surroundings, but really social affiliation, so your relationships with the people you love or your friendships, freedom or sense of freedom, self-actualization, and meaning and value. And she wrote extensively wrote on sense of purpose. Now, this is back in the 1960s, well before the positive psychology movement. So she was well ahead of all these founding fathers of positive psychology, yet no one knows about her. So,
no, I'd never heard of her before you mentioned her name, and I went, wow.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of stuff about Japanese culture we don't know or don't understand, probably is a better way of talking about it. We all think it's sushi and, I mean, you probably had this before, you know, you talk to friends, oh, let's go and eat Japanese, and they go, raw fish, don't want it. And I went, we've never been to a Japanese restaurant, have you? Okay. But the point is really, when you're talking about what this lady's talking about in terms of that sense of purpose, to me that's a really important point, because I know when I was watching a TED talk about 12 months ago, and there was a gentleman saying there's stages of retirement, and retirees die because they don't have a sense of purpose. Now, not all of them do. Those who find that sense of purpose don't, and they live long, healthy life past retirement age. But though it's generally that second year or the third year from retirement, that's when it's most important, because they're in depression, and then obviously they go backwards. So Ikigai is to me, can I say the answer to that?
What's interesting you say that, and I only found out about this last year. There actually are health and Ikigai creation advisors in Japan, and they have to be of retirement age, and they get certified by a government program, and they help mostly men go from retirement to a meaningful social life, because they have the same problem. They retire, they've dedicated their life to their company, and they're kind of almost useless after it. They have no sense of purpose. They're often described as a wet leaf stuck on their wife's shoe, because they cling to their wife, because the wife goes, oh, I'm going shopping. So the husband says, I'll come with you, like a wet leaf stuck on their shoe. So these health and Ikigai creation advisors help these retirees find a new role and sense of purpose in society, like in their local neighborhood, because it's a big problem, because, you know, Japan has, long life expectancy and
huge
health.
aging population there, isn't it?
And good health. So the government realised, actually the government's had many initiatives since the 1980s to try and, find this, or fill this gap of, well, what do we do with our retirees? And so, yeah, there are these Ikigai advisors in Japan now.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it would be essential because I know, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because whilst I understand a lot of Japanese sort of culture, but not really in depth, is when somebody starts work in Japan, it's basically you work there for life, basically. And
used to be that. It's not that anymore, unfortunately, or fortunately. Life employment is something of the past now.
Yeah, wow, that's fair. And to me, it's obviously because that's where they did find their purpose in life, because they did work for decades and decades with the one company. But I want to now shift places and look at interesting concept you talked about is ibasho. Ibasho, is that how you say it correctly?
Yeah, ibasho, well done. So this is another one of my favorite words. And this, we could consider this the social aspect of Ikigai. So it's a compound of the verb iru, which means to exist, and basho, which means place. And it used to mean just whereabouts, like where is the whereabouts of so-and-so.
Yep.
But when Japan started having these social problems where people were withdrawing from school and work, they needed a psychological term to sort of define, there's this lack of place to be, there's a lack of...
how do I fit? Is that
how do I fit into society? So ibasho became this term, and now it's a term that's researched. So ibasho is your place to be, and it can be two things. It can be a physical place where you like to go. So it could be, a cafe where people know your name and they know how to make your coffee. It could be a local park, or more importantly, it's the social context. So it's the group of friends you trust, or could be, your workplace where everyone feels included, they have a sense of purpose. And it's really important that we have an ibasho in our life so we can be authentic. So it also allows you to be the person you want to be. And your relationships with others is based on genuine care where there's no ulterior motives. And there's a third element to it is where you have the belief of a bright future. So it has those three elements where you feel, safe, secure, there's a sense of trust and I guess intimacy in your relationships, like spiritual or intellectual or emotional intimacy, and you have this idea of a bright future. Yeah, really cool concept.
Yeah, I mean, it does sound like a really, really cool concept. I mean, because when you look at it in, let's say, the Western world, obviously we're in Australia, but in the Western world, do we really have places like that here in Australia? Can we feel like that? And I think often in this Western culture, we put ourselves under more stress because we don't find ibasho. Yeah.
The irony, Dale, is all these wonderful concepts, Ikigai and ibasho, Japan currently has a severe lack of Ikigai, a severe lack of ibasho. So I'm always sort of up front about this, like these cultural concepts.
What hope have we got?
So, no, it's quite bad. They have some really unusual social withdrawal problems and things like lonely deaths, where every 3 hours Japanese men are dying alone, elderly men, and then there's something called hikikomori, which is this extreme form of social withdrawal. You might have heard of it, where young men just decide, I'm not going to participate in university, or I'm just not going to go to work. And they lock themselves in their bedrooms of their parents' house for decades.
You serious?
Yeah. It's hikikomori.
Take the door off a tin.
Yeah, that's what we would do. But we won't get into that. So I just want to say, these wonderful concepts that come from Japan, I think that the world's going through all these problems, like a lack of purpose, loneliness, no place to be ourselves. And as a result, many people are, they're just miserable, surviving, trying to survive each day.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah. So I don't want to paint this beautiful picture that Japan has solved all their problems. They do have problems, but the irony is they have these concepts that really could solve their problems. But I guess it's the price we pay for living in a capitalistic society.
Well, we do, and it's that, that society that's about achievement focused, and success, can I say, or accumulation of assets or wealth, and that's not what this is all about.
No.
But I want to just touch on another word, I suppose, from that point of view, is yutori.
Good, yutori.
So it's about creating space.
Yes. So this is probably something I think we all need, this idea of space. And we often decide to do things for our well-being. We might start yoga or meditation, and we're sort of still creating space that we end up filling up. So yutori is this idea where you just create space where you have the capacity to reflect on your life, to consider others, and have few worries. A great metaphor or way to understand it is, imagine it takes you 10 minutes to walk to the station every day.
Yep.
And you're usually flying, you're running out the door every morning because you haven't got your life together. With yutori, you allow 20 minutes to get to the station. So you have 10 minutes up your sleeve. And so if you bump into a neighbour and talk for 5 minutes, you're not looking at your watch thinking, oh, I've got to go. So you can have that 5-minute talk and still know you'll get to the station comfortably. So it's a concept, again, that's been studied, and you can have this concept, I guess, as mental space, physical space. So in the studio, there's a lot of space, feels really comfortable, feel really relaxed here. So there's a sense of yutori. Relationship space where you have time off from, perhaps your partner. Even, I guess, in context of obviously time. So you have time off in your day. So I think all of us need this space in our life just to not do anything and to get off the phone and not always be driven by something. And actually relates to a concept called ma in Japanese. And that's the idea. One way to understand that is the silence between notes in music. And without that, music would be sort of meaningless.
Yeah, I've heard this old saying that there's magic between your breath, But I was also, as you were speaking, it was reminding me of something I read in a book, and I think it was a Bob Proctor book called You're Born Rich. And he said, you can't buy new clothes till you empty your wardrobe.
Yeah.
And it's about creating space, because while we keep ourselves alive, so busy, we don't have space to think, we don't have space to be, we don't have space to look after ourselves, let alone anybody else. And I think that's what you're talking about when you're talking about yutori, is what is your space, whether it be a physical space or an emotional space. Yeah.
Could be, we could frame it as your quiet time.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's to me, what you're talking about is just an amazing, and I was going to say a set of tools, but that's completely wrong. It's not a set of tools. It's just, can you call this a lifestyle, or can you call it a way of living, or can you talk about it? What sort of one?
I mean, I think you can frame them as tools. I call them, I do call them tools in the Ikigai toolbox. And like, okay, if I'm coaching someone and, they're clearly stressed and going for too much, I say, well, hang on, let's slow down. Let me tell you about this concept, yutori. And, how can we create some yutori in your life? Because you're about to burn out. Or ibasho. You've essentially, I feel you've created this ibasho here, the studio, doing these interviews. So here, how could we create an ibasho for our clients? How can you create a social niche that's driven by purpose and inspires others and has meaningful connections and has a bright future?
Fantastic.
So,
So I'm sure everybody's going to read about it in your book, aren't they?
Hopefully, yes.
Is it in the bookshops and everything still? Or?
It's on the greatest bookshop of all, Amazon. Self-published, but I've just sold over 1,000 copies. So I'm pretty
well done. You're above most authors.
Yeah.
Most authors sold somewhere between 200 and 600 books in their lifetime. So you're doing well. So let's see if we can sell a couple more. What was your book called again?
Ikigai Kan, Feel a Life Worth Living. And remember, Kan is feeling. So Ikigai is all about how you feel.
Nick Kemp, thank you for being on Talking Well today.
Thank you very much, Dale.